We are two Star Wars nerds, and today we're continuing to talk about A New Hope. And actually, in particular, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about one of your, we can't call it a scene. It's not a favorite scene. It's a series of 6 scenes over 30 minutes. But your favorite portion of the movie. But more particularly, we're going to really look and kind of analyze and talk about what we think is a masterful use of tension and comedy on the Death Star. It is one of the most intense segments of the movie, but it's also one of the funniest. Yeah. And we think, I agree with Keely, the missus. I think this is actually one of the best parts of the whole movie. So just to kick things off, since this is like your favorite part, I love it, but it's not my favorite. But why don't we start it off just with why you like this so much?
Well, I have 2 favorites, but we're talking about this one right now. But my other favorite is obviously the Death Star, but that'll be a different video.
Like the trench run and the explosion, all that? Yeah, that's my favorite.
So that I figured it was, so it's good that we have 2 then. So that video will be coming. But why I like this scene so much, and even when you're asking like your favorite scene, I'm like, well, it's not one scene. It's like you said, 6 scenes. But like I was telling you, like I can't just pick one. Like you have to go on to the next of this like portion, this 30 minutes. It's just also connected. And what I really like is the first time you see Leia, Luke, and Chewie and Han together. And obviously those are the main characters, so that's super cool. You get to the confrontation with Obi-Wan and Darth Vader. And there's just so much comedy, yet there's so much tension throughout this 30 minutes. It just keeps you so invested. It keeps you so like interested. And there's even like character development in that short 30 minutes, that portion of the movie. So I just think it's done really well. You're introduced to Leia in a really cool way. You have like some iconic scenes, you know, the Wookiee prisoner scene that is still referenced in shows and movies today. So yeah, I think there's just so much majesty, I guess, in this portion.
Wow. What a term. Okay.
But I couldn't think of another word. But
it works.
But it's really good. So yeah, it works. That wasn't the word I was looking for, but it sums up what I was going for. But yeah, I like the tension. I like the comedy, and even the droids. I just think it's really good, and I think it was really well done. And like one of my favorite parts, like I said in the beginning, is the first time you seeing the 4 characters together. Oh yeah, and when you said that, I'm like, you're right. Like I didn't really think that is the first time that all 4 are together. I mean, I've seen this movie so many times. Like I'm not surprised that that's the first time. Yeah. But putting it in that context, honestly, that was something I hadn't thought about, that kind of weight before, because even when you see all these personalities start to clash, and you know, even in Chewbacca, you find out he's just a giant, ruthless teddy bear. So I mean, he is like a great warrior, a great friend, but then he's also like afraid. And then you see like Leia, who is just like when awesome. When Luke walks in, she's mocking him. Not knowing he's there to save her. Right. And then she just starts calling the shots, and Han is like, no one's telling me what to do. And Luke I think Luke, in the best way, he has like no idea what's going on. He's just excited and running full force. Yep. And he's just in the adventure, in the moment. And then you have Obi doing his kind of secret mission,
his own thing, and you have Vader like trying to search out Obi, and you know, there's just so many interesting things that play with personalities. But what I really liked about this, rewatching it, looking for this context of tension and comedy, of this building of something that makes you uneasy and anxious, but then a release, is that rewatching the 30 minutes, George Lucas will build tension, and then he releases it momentarily to build it up even bigger. Yeah. And all of it's towards the end of the movie. Right. But in this 30 minutes, it's relentless. It just keeps building and building and building. And there's all of these little micro victories that they get, but it actually just plunges them further into trouble. And really that keeps going until the TIE fighter chase. But you could even reel it back and say once Obi-Wan Kenobi dies and they escape, there's a massive relief and a massive release of tension. So let's do this. I think the best way to analyze this, to dive deep, is to look at the two tracks of Darth Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and also rescuing Leia. There's two missions, if you will, happening concurrently. And there's going to be a lot of back and forth here. But one thing, you noted it right off the bat when we were rewatching this, just refreshing our memory with this, how Darth Vader immediately says, "This is a present I haven't felt since." And he takes off and he starts looking for Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah, he knows who it is.
Yeah, and so when we're thinking about that tension and comedy, like, and this being part of one of your favorite string of scenes, like, what kind of weight does that hold for you? Like, those beginning moments right there.
It holds a lot of weight, especially it holds even more weight after the prequels. Like, the prequels make that scene so much more important because they haven't seen each other since, Vader became Vader, since he's been in the suit. So it's a very impactful scene, and it's an important scene because Obi-Wan knew what he was doing. Like, he wasn't going there to defeat Vader. He was going there to, I guess, be promoted in the Force, so he could help Luke better. Obviously, Vader didn't know that was his plan, and he sees it as a victory, but it's such an important scene based off where those two, Obi-Wan and Anakin, left off in Revenge of the Sith. This is like the full circle. As much as I don't like Obi-Wan dying, the reality is it did help Luke, and he sacrificed himself to help Luke and to save the galaxy, really.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to think about how the prequels backed up this scene. Obviously, when you watched it before, the 1990s, the late 1990s, that weight and context wasn't there. But I love watching it now, especially after watching the prequels, knowing, like, man, like, Vader is ruthless.
Yeah.
And I love when...
And from his perspective, he kind of has a right to be upset. Like, this guy chopped off his legs and put him in he didn't put him in a suit, but from Vader's perspective, this guy wants revenge. Yeah. Like, he took almost everything from him.
Oh, yeah. And, there's even... we're going to jump ahead just a second, and we're going to reel it back, because Anakin's pride, or you could say Vader's pride now, still shows through, because when they finally meet up, Anakin says, "Now I am the master." And even reeling it back further, when Vader's talking to Tarkin, he is saying, he is here. And they're talking about Obi. And he says, he is my old master.
Right.
And so you see this progression where he's like, "This isn't a present I have felt since." And then he's saying to Tarkin, this was my old master. And then he says, "Now I am the master." Right. And so it's like nothing has really changed since Mustafar. If anything, it's actually gotten worse.
Yeah, there's been some time for things to heat up and...
Yeah. And... that what's masterful about this segment of the movie is that internal tension that Anakin has, that Vader has, it's being drawn out, and even through things like the music. I found it so fascinating that in this portion, you hear a lot of drums being played, and there's this drama that is stirring, where in contrast, when Han, Chewie, and Luke are going to rescue Leia, you have a lot of horns and strings and fanfare, and there's also a lot of silence when you're following Obi-Wan around. And so there's like the atmosphere is created. So instead of the sweeping soundtrack, the instruments are coming in piece by piece. And a lot of it I found is very mysterious. It's very disjointed. There's some themes that are recognizable there, but what ends up happening is I just feel uncomfortable the whole time. Like there's not really a center for the music. I feel like I'm being thrown around. And I mean, for me, it works because it keeps me tense
and
inside.
it kind of pulls you in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like makes you kind of a part of it, like you're on the wall, like watching what's going on.
Yeah, and you know, I love even when Obi-Wan's sneaking around and all you hear is like the hum of the machinery and the footsteps of the stormtroopers. And there's this silence where you're like, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to make noise in this moment.
Right.
But even when Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi meet, there's no music. Like for the good portion of their fight, it's actually just lightsabers and then their dialogue, and then it is Vader's breathing. And I just found that so fascinating because like the major tension of this 30 minutes is that right there. Is Vader and Obi. And I think to help switch gears, when we contrast that with the rescuing of Leia, like I know for you love the release. I love the tension. I love that feeling, and I know you like it as well. But for you were talking a lot about like the comedic releases in this. So like, what are some of your like favorite, I guess, comedic releases in this? And like, just talk about those for a second, because I thought your opinions were really cool.
I mean, even the Leia's line that you already mentioned, how she's like, aren't you a little short to be a stormtrooper? She calls Chewie like a walking carpet.
Yeah.
And like part of me is like a little offended because I love Chewie. So I'm like, you can't, like, that's so rude. But the other part, I'm like, okay, it's kind of funny. She doesn't know. And then even like Han's response, like your worshipfulness, and just, that back and forth. And there's that already that tension in Han and Leia that starts right off the bat, and obviously it progresses in the movies. But yeah, I think, and even the droids are funny, like how C-3PO's like, well, what are we supposed to do when they go to rescue Leia? And they're like, essentially lock the doors and hope they don't have blasters. And then just C-3PO's like, in his mind probably, he's like, I'm a droid, like, what am I, like, I have no hope here. So just even how they interact with the droids, and the droids are like, how am I supposed to figure this out? I'm a droid. And I love R2 and C-3PO. They're always so, like, they are always like comedic relief. Like if they're coming in, something funny is gonna happen. So those are kind of my favorite, I guess, funny, lighthearted moments in that part. But like you said, I think while I do like those moments, I think the tension is necessary, because then it makes those comedic moments even more of a relief, I guess. Like they mean more rather than just funny. There's this, this ebb and flow. That's the right term. And so that it makes the comedy makes the tension more meaningful, and the tension makes the comedy more meaningful, and really it builds a beautiful story.
And it is such a masterful story at that, because like it's one thing to just have like just tension, and it's like, I've watched movies like that where I'm like, it can
be overwhelming.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm like, I need to go take a nap.
And it can be stressful, and it can just create like, oh man, there's something in me that just doesn't feel right. But when there's this natural comedy that flows, like you get a breather for a second. And when you think about it, a 30-minute segment, if that was all tension, our view of A New Hope would be very different. But it works well, because what's amazing again is you will have these moments of like fanfare and trumpets and horns where you're like, there's victory, yes. And then all of a sudden you're in a dark, claustrophobic hallway, and there's this really Eastern melody being played on oboes and these instruments where you're like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is very foreign to me. I don't know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then it'll cut to silence,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll cut to drums, and then again you have fanfare, and then all of a sudden you're just like getting thrown in with these different instruments and things, and then there's jokes, and
Right.
like in a good way it keeps changing, but it's making you, like you said, it's pulling you in, it's making you engaged, and you
Mm-hmm.
feel like you're there.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we were talking about this, we're like, how long is this segment really? And we're like, oh my, this is like
30
a
minutes.
30-minute segment.
Right.
Like, but it definitely does not feel like that.
Right.
And you know, I love Han Solo. I really do.
Yes.
One of
Me
my
too.
favorite moments is once they actually just kind of they clear out that area right before they rescue Princess Leia,
Mm-hmm.
and Han's like talking over the intercom system to the Imperial troops, and he's just totally BSing, and he's like trying to just like use his gift of gab to like
Mhm.
navigate through this. And they're like, "What's your call sign?" Or it was something like that. "What's your call sign?" or "What's your code?" And he's just like, and then he just bam, like, forget this, just shoots it, and then he yells for Luke, and he's like, "We've got company, like we've
Right.
got to go." Like, I think that's so great because right after we get this victory, we get this tension built up and this relief, and then it's like, oh, here we go, like it's about to happen.
Right.
And even something like this with the trash compactor, like
Mhm.
that
That's another iconic scene.
whole scene, like
Mhm.
I remember as a kid watching this, and I still get a little nervous even though I know it's going to happen. Remember as a kid, I'm like, how are they going to get out of this?
Yeah.
And
The droids save the day.
they do. And I think that that ties so well onto the point you made about how the droids were being R2D2 and C3PO are being used for comedic relief,
Mm-hmm.
but then also they end up being the secret agents who save their lives.
Mm-hmm. They're very important.
Yeah, they are. They're a lot
I
more
love
than
them,
just comedic
yes.
relief. You know,
Yes.
they're and that's what's cool is everybody has a role to play.
Mm-hmm.
And I think finally when you have this thread of Luke and Leia and Han and Chewie and and then R2 and C3PO and Obi and Vader, when all of this finally collides in that single moment where there's three different things happening,
Mm-hmm.
and you're trying to navigate, like, wait, stuff's getting crossed.
Right.
They don't even really know what's happening. It's cool because like the Force theme starts to come in and more fanfare
Mm-hmm.
and all of this. But in that moment when we're thinking about tension and relief, like where for this being one of your favorite scenes, moments
Right.
in A New Hope, like where does it leave you? And even though here, I guess let me rephrase this. I see the scene ending with defeat
Mhm.
and tension,
Mm-hmm.
but they do escape, and that's not you. That's not like something you typically enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
So why, with it ending that way, why is it your favorite? Like when everything meets and it goes the way it does.
Honestly, it's because I know what happens next. And while the characters see it as defeat, it wasn't a defeat. Like I was saying before, Obi-Wan can now help Luke in a better way.
Mhm.
And that's how he then later on destroys the Death Stars, because that's Obi-Wan. So really they see it as a defeat, but they don't know that actually Obi-Wan is able to help Luke and make him more powerful. So I don't see it as a defeat because I know the story. I can't remember back to when I was a little girl and I first
Yeah.
watched it. I'm sure that was because I'm like, you don't know what's happening.
Mhm.
And I was probably different, but now knowing the full story, I'm like, you guys don't know it, but it looks bad, but it's not.
You're like, it'll all work out.
Just wait.
Just give it a few minutes.
Maybe not the way I would have wanted. Like I said, I didn't want Obi-Wan to die. Maybe not the way they wanted, but it does work out, and it's what's supposed to happen.
Yeah, and I love how even Rogue One sets us up with getting to the plans to the Death Star, and even the whole idea that this ragtag group of people got together and infiltrated the Death Star
Mm-hmm.
and left with their lives. Like, that is so crazy. And then they just go back, and it goes right into my favorite scene or segments of scenes. But with this, I think we're going to actually just end on that note, because otherwise we're going to talk as long as this scene or segments of scenes is. But hopefully you guys can just connect with this and even let us know in the comments what you think about the tension and comedy and these 6 scenes and why they make A New Hope just so incredible. And just a few things. If you've made it this far, I think if you made it this far in the video, you obviously like us a little bit. I mean, you listened to us for like 20 minutes.
Right.
But there's a few things. We actually have a Discord server that we are working on right now. And essentially, we just want to start gathering some people and just really start building a little community. A lot's happening in the comment section. And so, yeah, just keep your eyes open for that. We'll let you know at the end of another video when that's released. But, we have some kind of cool things planned for it. And it's not going to be anything crazy. We just want to just connect with people and be able to build some hopefully lifelong relationships. Just some cool stuff.
Yeah.
But with that, this is one of the coolest segment of scenes in A New Hope. We are 2 Star Wars nerds, and may the Force be with you always.
Always.